You probably rewound that intro, or you're already thinking about whether you came across the right video, or whether you should have kept scrolling, and now you're thinking about the fact that you're thinking about it, and yeah, hi, this one's for you. Most people assume overthinkers just worry too much, that it's some nervous habit, like biting your nails, except instead of your nails, it's every social interaction you've had since 2009. But that framing completely misses what's actually going on inside the minds of people who can't seem to turn it off. And once you understand the real mechanism, you'll probably feel something you haven't felt in a while, like someone finally gets it. So let's actually go there. Your brain has a network. Researchers call it the default mode network that fires up the moment you stop focusing on the outside world. Introspection, future imagining, replaying the past, reading social situations. In people who overthink, that network runs loud, constantly, exhaustingly loud. That's the short version. But the more interesting question isn't which brain network is involved, it's why it won't stop and what it's actually trying to achieve. Because the brain isn't misfiring, but doing something incredibly sophisticated. There's a critical difference between productive reflection, where you're actually moving toward a conclusion, and what psychologist Susan Nolan Hoeksema spent decades researching and called rumination, where you cycle through the same thoughts repeatedly without ever arriving anywhere. You're not problem solving, you're rehearsing the problem, over and over in slightly different costumes, none of which help. Her research found that rumination doesn't just feel bad in the moment, it amplifies the negative emotion while you're inside it and makes you significantly more likely to develop depression over time. The thinking doesn't process the emotion, it preserves it like amber. And the frustrating irony is that the whole reason you keep thinking is because some part of you believes that if you just think long and hard, you'll eventually land on the thing that makes it okay. Sadly, you won't. But you'll try anyway, at 2 a.m. when you have to be up at 7. A lot of overthinkers grew up in environments where uncertainty was rather dangerous. No dramatics here, but in the everyday sense of not knowing what mood someone would be in, or whether you were reading the room correctly. Your brain learned, very young, that thinking ahead was how you stayed okay. It was adaptive and smart. The problem is that you're still doing it in situations you don't need to. At the grocery store, in a text message, in a meeting where someone's facial expression was slightly ambiguous and now you're building a whole case file. The brain doesn't distinguish between a genuine threat and a social scenario you've over-indexed on. Cortisol is cortisol, and your body's response to it is real. So this part tends to land differently for different people, and I'm guilty myself, so hear me out. There's a specific form of overthinking that is almost entirely about other people. Well, in how they perceive you, I should say, where you constantly run simulations of how other people might be feeling, what they might be thinking, whether something was taken the wrong way, replaying conversations looking for the moment you might have hurt someone accidentally. You draft and redraft messages not because you can't get the right wording, but because you're trying to account for every possible way it could be received. I'm sure someone watching just went, "Oh, that's me." Well, don't worry. That's actually a form of deep empathy at work, just without an off switch. Think about the last time you had to cancel plans with someone. A normal person types, "So sorry, can you reschedule?" and hits send in about 9 seconds, give or take. An overthinker opens the message, writes that, reads it back, decides sorry implies they did something wrong, rewrites it without the sorry, then worries that sounds cold, adds it back in, stares at the word reschedule wondering if it sounds presumptuous, writes 3 completely different versions, sends one to a friend for a second opinion, and then after somewhere between the 12 and 25-minute mark, sends something almost identical to the original. And then finally, immediately reads their own message back, wondering if it landed okay. The cruelest part is that this hyper-awareness of others often means overthinkers are the last to give themselves the same level of compassion they extend to everyone else. You'll spend 40 minutes convincing a friend that they are not a burden, and then lie awake convincing yourself that you are one. Same mind, different set of rules for themselves. There's also this maddening phenomenon, and psychologist Daniel Wegner demonstrated it pretty brilliantly in what became known as the white bear experiment, where trying to not think about something sets up a rebound that's almost impossible to escape. He told participants not to think of a white bear.
They managed it, barely, but the moment the suppression lifted, the thought came back harder than if they'd never tried to push it away at all. The suppression created a debt, which means that every time you've told yourself to just stop overthinking, every time someone has helpfully suggested you to just stop worrying about it, you were neurologically setting yourself up for the thought to flood back worse than before. Kind of ironic, really, but it wasn't your active fault at least. Something worth noting, some overthinkers will tell you they have no problem making quick decisions about things they'd class as meaningless or don't care about, like what to eat tonight. It's mostly the things that matter to them, the relationships, the choices that feel loaded with consequence, where everything stalls. Which tells you something important. The overthinking isn't random noise. It maps almost exactly onto what they value, what they're afraid of losing, who they love, and who they want to be seen as. Your anxiety knows what you care about. It's just communicating it in the worst way imaginable. People who think too much also tend to have a complicated relationship with rest. Of course, they enjoy it like everyone else, but stillness removes the one thing keeping the thoughts manageable: distraction. The moment you sit down, or try to sleep, or stop consuming input, the backlog floods in. So you stay busy, because that's the only volume dial you found that kind of works. And the longer that goes on, the harder it becomes to just be somewhere without immediately trying to escape being there. Understanding why you overthink doesn't automatically make it stop, and it's not supposed to. Awareness is just the point where you can start asking better questions. Not how do I make this go away, but what is this thought actually trying to protect me from, and does that threat still exist? Because most of the time, it doesn't. The danger your brain is scanning for may have dissolved years ago. What's left is a very well-practiced habit. The goal isn't a quieter mind. That's probably not coming, and chasing it just adds another layer of frustration. The goal is a more honest relationship with the thoughts you have, to be able to look at a spiral and say, I see what you're doing, I know why you're doing it, and I'm going to decide how much of my evening you actually get. That's not a small thing. That's most of it, actually. One last thing, and I only mention things I'd actually use myself. There's a link in the description to a bundle I think a lot of you will find genuinely useful. It's a collection of 7-day guides and planners built around the things that most people watching this kind of content are quietly dealing with: clearing the mental backlog, rebalancing your dopamine so your brain stops craving constant noise, actually fixing your sleep rather than just thinking about fixing your sleep, and rebuilding your focus one day at a time. Each one gives you a specific daily action, not just information, which honestly is the part most psychology content skips. It's in the pinned comment too, so I hope you check it out. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on my future uploads.